Raj Kumar here in Dubai. We are continuing the conversation on global education now with Jeanne Allen, who's the CEO of the Center for Education Reform. We're both based in Washington, D.C., but here we are in Dubai having this conversation. And your focus is really on charter schools in the U.S., but that's extending globally now. So let's talk about that. What is the opportunity for taking charter schools,
Sure.
which are public schools, and bringing them to the developing world?
Sure, and if I may, our focus is really on systemic education reform and changes, expanding the opportunity for students to access schools that most meet their needs and allowing for the innovation, flexibility, and freedom that we know can occur once you have that kind of opportunity.
Got it.
And so that actually has translated in our earliest years into helping form most of the nation's charter school laws, and still continues as charters are kind of that beta test, if you will, for innovation. And what's been interesting, even as we work on a number of issues, is that so many of the developing countries have sought our advice and have come to the U.S. and tried to learn from what we've learned in charter schools and to bring back to their own country.
And what are the opportunities? What are you hearing from people who are coming from countries in the global south who are interested in this opportunity?
So first, what we're hearing, Raj, is that they believe that having more of these micro schools, these smaller environments where teachers are empowered, where parents and families can find the environment best fits their kids, is actually not just elevating the importance of education, but it's making families realize that they have a stake, right, that gives them really more power to engage. Many of the folks in developing countries just have had whatever's offered to them, if that, right? And they've been challenged by terrain, geography, inequity, and charters actually help equalize the opportunity because you can go find something that you think is better for your kids.
Got it. Your parents have more of a voice in the process.
And another thing we're also hearing from government officials, for example, parliaments in Kenya, people in Ghana, other areas, is that this whole notion about regulation that the U.S. has grappled with for years, you know, top-down control, not a lot of creativity can occur, large systems, focus on rules, not outcomes, that's actually an issue, which surprised me in developing countries as well. That sort of government centralized schooling, which didn't allow for the best innovations, for example, the kinds of stuff we're talking about here in Dubai today and tomorrow, to occur, is one of the other reasons that they like the concept of charters. It disconnects the politicization of education, and it puts it more in communities' hands.
Which has certainly happened in the U.S. Education is a very politicized issue. Charters, vouchers, public, private, there's lots of debate.
Right.
How is that playing out in the developing world? I mean, obviously it's a lot of countries, a lot of diversity, but in general, what are you seeing?
Right, well there's two kinds of politicization, I'd say, or politics when it comes to education. There's the politics of the schools. You have to elect school board members, right? State legislators and governors have something to do with, a lot to do with whether or not schools get funded certain ways or what people's pet programs are. At the federal level, there's lots of strings attached. Then there's the politicization of what happens at the local level itself in the school. By giving parents an opportunity to make choices, then you disconnect having who you vote for and who that person claims to represent or represents, right? So when you have teachers unions and associations of people who represent different parts of the puzzle, you tend to be more political. What we're hearing from developing nations that are working on charters is, first of all, there's still lots of opposition, as you can imagine. I mean, there are enormous associations of teachers and administrators in other countries as well.
Who are opposed to this kind of...
Who are opposed to something that breaks up their monopoly. I don't think it's because they want power. I think it's because that's what they're used to. They believe truly and deeply, and I respect that unless you manage teachers, unless you manage the education arena, unless you provide the set amount of money, that there's inequities going to occur, right? But what we've seen is the opposite. Even though well-intentioned, we're managing it from the top down, we're making sure everyone's treated equally, supposedly, the problem is then you're controlling so much you don't allow for variety, autonomy, creativity to thrive. In other words, if everyone's following certain rules and regulations, you're at the lowest common denominator. So the politics is people who protect the status quo, people who want reform, and what the developing countries are going through now is kind of like 1995 in the United States.
Interesting.
Who's right, who's wrong, and the fight really comes down to whether parents are going to be strong enough and students are going to demonstrate so much success that you can't deny this kind of freedom. Because once you let it out of the box, once you give parents and teachers choices about how schooling operates, you can't put it back.
Now, one of the things interesting about this forum, it's one of those unique places where all sides of this argument come together. Right? We've got union leaders here, we've got leaders in school reform. How does that play out for you? Do you find there are productive conversations here at a forum like this where you can actually get together with people who disagree and discuss key issues like the ones we're talking about now?
Yeah, what's fantastic about this forum, Raj, is it does have this diversity of people who come from all sorts of different sides in different countries, and what makes it really productive and people able to focus on the object, which is improving education so that we can equalize learning for everyone and make everyone's lives better, is that countries are so different in their governance structure. So what a union leader represents and believes in, a developing country, for example, is similar but has a different outcome than it does in the US, right? And so they really still believe very much in quality. So there's discussions about quality which are different in a US union from a developing country union. The differences in discussion about teacher retention and how you get there. I was in a deep dive today with people from over 15 countries. And while there was lots of disagreement, it was civil, it was thoughtful, and there was a real interest in understanding one another. Whereas when you're in the same country, you tend to think you already know what the other person's about to say.
Right.
And so I have thinking having this global environment really helps the debate, and I think will help us get to our goal about 2030 a lot quicker.
Well, that's a great positive note to end on. I want to thank you for taking some time to speak with us today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Raj. Appreciate it.